Miami was once called Magic City for a reason. The neon lights reflected off Biscayne Bay like liquid dreams, and every corner promised a story worth living. Young people from every background danced under the same sky, shared the same beaches, dreamed the same electric dreams. The city pulsed with possibility. But something fundamental has shifted in the heartbeat of South Florida's crown jewel, and if you've walked those streets lately, you felt it too. The magic didn't just fade. It was bought, repackaged, and sold back to us at a price most can never afford. Today, Miami stands as a monument to a different kind of transformation. The clubs that once welcomed everyone now demand cover charges that exceed a week's groceries. The beaches remain free, technically, but the neighborhoods surrounding them have become fortresses of wealth. What happened to the city that promised endless summer to anyone brave enough to chase it?
The answer is more disturbing than you might expect, and it reveals a pattern spreading across America's most desirable cities like a virus of exclusivity. Let me take you back to 2010. Miami was still recovering from the housing crash, still vulnerable, still accessible. A bartender could afford a studio in South Beach. An artist could rent warehouse space in Wynwood. Musicians gathered in dive bars where the cover charge was $5 and the drinks were strong enough to fuel revolution. The city breathed creativity because it had room to breathe. You could fail here and try again. You could experiment, collaborate, dream without a trust fund backing your ambitions. That Miami is gone, and what replaced it is a carefully constructed playground for the global elite. The transformation began quietly. International investors, flush with capital and hunting for safe harbors, discovered Miami's potential.
They saw sunshine, tax advantages, and a city with one foot in Latin America and the other in the United States. They saw opportunity. What they didn't see, or perhaps didn't care about, were the communities that had built Miami's cultural foundation over decades. Russian oligarchs, Venezuelan flight capital, European investment funds, Asian conglomerates. The money arrived in waves, each one pushing the waterline of affordability higher, drowning neighborhoods that had thrived for generations. Luxury condominiums erupted along the coastline like steel and glass monuments to excess. Developers promised exclusive amenities, private beach clubs, concierge services that anticipated every whim. These weren't homes, they were investments, assets to be held and appreciated, often sitting empty while their owners circulated between London, Dubai, and Singapore. The buildings rose higher and higher, casting literal shadows over the communities below, blocking ocean breezes that had cooled the streets for free since before air conditioning existed. And with each new tower, the tax assessments climbed, the rents increased, and another family that had called Miami home found themselves priced into exodus. South Beach underwent the most dramatic metamorphosis. The Art Deco district, once a bohemian paradise where models, artists, and dreamers mingled freely, became a luxury brand. Hotels that charged $100 a night in 2000 now demand $600 for the same room, renovated with minimal actual improvements but maximum marketing savvy. The restaurants that served Cuban sandwiches for $8 closed, replaced by establishments where appetizers start at $30 and entrees routinely exceed $60. Even the cafes, those democratic spaces where you could nurse an espresso for hours while writing your novel or planning your next move, transformed into see and be seen venues where lingering without spending is quietly discouraged. Wynwood's story perfectly encapsulates the pattern. In 2005, the neighborhood was industrial warehouses and working-class Puerto Rican families. Artists discovered cheap rent and large spaces. They created. They collaborated. They painted murals that transformed blank walls into storytelling masterpieces. The Wynwood Walls project, intended to celebrate street art, succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. It put the neighborhood on the global map. Tourists arrived. Developers noticed. Within a decade, those same warehouses that rented for a few $100s a month were subdivided into boutiques and galleries where a small canvas could cost more than a year's rent had been. The artists who created Wynwood's appeal couldn't afford to stay in the neighborhood they built. The nightlife economy reveals the exclusion most starkly. Miami's clubs once operated on a beautiful democracy. Your cover charge got you in. Your dancing got you noticed.
Your personality determined your night. Now, clubs operate on a bottle service model that would make a medieval feudal lord blush. Want a table? That's a minimum of $1,000, often much more for prime locations or popular nights. The calculation is ruthless and intentional. One table spending $5,000 generates more revenue and fewer complications than 50 people paying $20 covers. The clubs evolved, or devolved depending on your perspective, into exclusive temples where access is determined purely by financial capability. The beach clubs pushed this model even further. Nikki Beach, Live, Story, each competing to create the most exclusive experience. Daybeds cost hundreds.
Cabanas run into thousands. A bottle of vodka that retails for $30 arrives at your table for $500, $600, sometimes more. The justification is always the same. You're paying for the experience, the ambiance, the exclusivity. But what you're really paying for is the right to exist in a space that has decided your presence is only valuable if you can afford to announce it financially. Meanwhile, the neighborhoods where working people actually live tell a different story. Little Haiti, Overtown, Liberty City. These communities have watched Miami's wealth accumulate on the horizon like storm clouds they cannot escape. Gentrification arrived with its usual promises. Investment means improvement, they said. Rising property values help everyone, they claimed. But the families in these neighborhoods know better. They've seen this movie before. The coffee shops arrive first, signaling scouts for the main invasion. Then come the boutiques, the renovated buildings, the young professionals seeking authenticity at a discount before the neighborhood fully transitions. Property taxes rise. Longtime landlords sell to developers who see more profit in renovation than preservation. And the people who gave the neighborhood its soul, its culture, its actual authenticity find themselves displaced to suburbs farther and farther from the city they built. The economic data confirms what anyone walking Miami's streets can feel. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Miami Beach now exceeds $2,500 monthly. In Brickell, the financial district where young professionals used to find their first apartments, that number climbs even higher. Meanwhile, the median income for Miami residents has barely budged when adjusted for inflation. The math doesn't work. A person earning Miami's median income of approximately $43,000 annually cannot afford Miami's median rent without spending more than 60% of their income on housing. Financial advisors recommend 30%. The gap between recommendation and reality has become a chasm swallowing the middle class. The service workers who keep Miami functioning face an impossible equation. They serve drinks at clubs they cannot afford to enter as customers. They clean hotel rooms in buildings where a single night costs more than their weekly paycheck. They cook in restaurants where the meal they prepare would consume an entire day's wages. And they commute. Oh, how they commute. From Homestead in the south, from Pembroke Pines in the west, from North Miami Beach if they're lucky. Hours each day spent in traffic, burning gas they can barely afford, just to serve a city that needs them but cannot house them. The COVID pandemic accelerated everything. Remote workers from New York, California, and other high-cost states discovered they could relocate to Florida, maintain their inflated salaries, and pay no state income tax. The migration resembled a gold rush. Real estate prices, already high, entered orbit. Bidding wars became standard. Investors, sensing opportunity, swooped in with cash offers above asking price, converting single-family homes into short-term rentals. The Airbnb-ification of Miami removed even more housing from the permanent rental market, further constricting supply while demand exploded. Miami's politicians responded with the efficiency of a rusted machine. They celebrated the wealth influx, the rising property values, the international prestige. They cut ribbons on new luxury developments while affordable housing proposals languished in committee. The few affordable units that did get built came with waiting lists measured in years. Section 8 vouchers became nearly useless as landlords could simply refuse them and find market-rate tenants immediately. The social safety net designed to catch falling families found itself overwhelmed and underfunded, unable to slow the displacement. Even the cultural institutions that defined Miami's character buckled under financial pressure.
Independent music venues closed as their leases expired, and landlords opted for tenants who could pay triple the rent. Art galleries in Little Havana, once showcasing local Cuban-American artists, became victim to their own success as collectors drove up prices beyond local affordability. The theaters, the community centers, the small museums that preserved neighborhood histories found themselves struggling as their donor base dispersed across state lines, chasing housing they could actually afford. The food scene tells this story in miniature. Miami's culinary reputation was built on hole-in-the-wall gems.
The Haitian restaurant where griot and pickles cost $8 and transported you straight to Port-au-Prince. The Venezuelan arepa stand where $2 bought you lunch and conversation. The Nicaraguan bakery where the tres leches cake was legendary and affordable. These places weren't just restaurants, they were community anchors, gathering spaces, edible heritage. Many have closed or relocated to less expensive areas. What replaced them? Farm-to-table concepts where small plates cost $20 and the aesthetic is carefully curated to appeal to an audience more concerned with Instagram than sustenance. The irony cuts deep. Miami marketed itself as an international city, a cultural melting pot, a place where Latin American, Caribbean, and American cultures blended into something unique. That diversity was authentic because it was economic as well as cultural. People from different backgrounds and income levels shared spaces, created together, learned from each other. The new Miami is international only in the sense that the wealthy are international. The cultural exchange now happens at charity galas and Art Basel events with $500 tickets, not on street corners and in neighborhood parks where it costs nothing but presence. Young people feel the shift most acutely. A generation ago, Miami offered a particular promise. Bring your youth, your energy, your dreams. The city will meet you halfway. Work hard, hustle smart, and you could build something. That contract has been voided. Today's young person arriving in Miami faces a stark choice. Come from wealth or accept a life of permanent financial precarity, multiple roommates well into your 30s, side hustles stacked on side hustles, the gig economy's false promise of flexibility masking its reality of instability. The beach, Miami's greatest democratic space, remains technically free. But even there, the exclusion creeps in. Private beach clubs now occupy prime sand, their boundaries marked by ropes and security guards. The public access points shrink each year as new developments claim their oceanfront. Parking costs rise, ensuring that even accessing the free beach requires financial commitment. And on the sand itself, the social segregation is visible. The expensive beach club sections, the public sections, the territories as clearly marked as any medieval kingdom. Some argue this is simply market forces at work, supply and demand, the natural evolution of a desirable city. They point to San Francisco, New York, London, claiming this is just Miami joining the ranks of truly global cities. But this argument ignores the human cost and the cultural loss. A city is not just buildings and businesses. It's the people, the communities, the cultures they create and maintain. When those people are systematically priced out, what remains may be prosperous, but it's not the same place. It's a simulation, a theme park version of itself, optimized for profit over soul. The condo towers that dominate Miami's skyline now stand as monuments to absence. Studies suggest that up to half of the luxury units remain vacant most of the year, owned by investors or part-time residents who spend only weeks in the city annually. These are ghost towers, their lights occasionally flickering on during high season, but otherwise dark, vertical safety deposit boxes for capital looking for haven. Meanwhile, families sleep in cars, couch surf with relatives, or flee to other states where the math of survival, at least theoretically, works. The creative community, once Miami's lifeblood, has hemorrhaged talent. Musicians, writers, visual artists, the people who create the culture that makes a city interesting and attractive, cannot afford to take the risks that creativity requires when rent consumes 70% of income. They leave for Atlanta, Austin, Mexico City, anywhere the cost of existence doesn't demand abandoning your art for full-time survival. And with their departure, Miami loses the cultural production that made it distinctive. What fills the void?
Curated experiences designed for temporary residents and tourists, Instagram-ready but ultimately hollow. The universities and colleges, theoretically anchoring a young, educated population, struggle to retain graduates. A University of Miami graduate faces immediate crisis. Their degree prepares them for a career, but their entry-level salary cannot support Miami living costs. They have two choices: leave immediately for cities where young professionals can actually afford life, or stay and accept dramatically reduced quality of life, postponing the markers of adulthood indefinitely. Most leave. The brain drain is real and accelerating. Latin American immigration, historically one of Miami's defining characteristics, now flows differently. The city still attracts wealthy Latin Americans fleeing instability or seeking tax advantages. But the working and middle-class immigrants who built Miami's cultural foundation find themselves locked out. The affordable neighborhoods where previous generations established their foothold have been gentrified beyond reach. The family networks that helped new arrivals get established cannot help when the baseline cost of existence exceeds what anyone can reasonably earn. The environmental reality adds another layer to Miami's dysfunction. Sea level rise threatens the city's long-term viability. Scientists project significant flooding challenges within decades. Yet luxury development continues unabated, building right at sea level, as if physics will make an exception for wealth. The cognitive dissonance is stunning. Billions invested in properties that may become uninhabitable, while the infrastructure investments necessary to protect the city lag behind.
But infrastructure is public, benefits everyone, and requires collective action. Luxury towers are private, benefit few, and generate immediate returns. The market has spoken. Public transportation remains inadequate, despite Miami's density and traffic nightmares. Why? Partly because the political will to invest in comprehensive public transit requires vision beyond electoral cycles. But also because a robust public transportation system would enable working people to live farther out and still access jobs, potentially easing some displacement pressure. The current system keeps workers car-dependent and geographically constrained, unable to escape the rent traps without sacrificing employment. The schools tell their own displacement story. Miami's public schools serve increasingly poor and working-class students, as middle-class families flee or opt for private education. The student population becomes more concentrated in poverty as neighborhoods gentrify and families with children are the first to be priced out. Meanwhile, funding formulas tied to property taxes mean that as wealthier residents move in, school budgets should theoretically increase. But the wealthy often send their children to private schools, supporting public education only through taxes they fight to minimize. The result is a public school system under permanent stress, underfunded relative to need, unable to provide the quality education that might help break cycles of poverty. Miami's homeless population has exploded. Not the stereotype of chronic homelessness, though that exists too, but working people who lost the housing lottery. They have jobs, sometimes multiple jobs, but cannot find housing they can afford. They sleep in cars, in tents under overpasses, in shelters designed for temporary stays that have become permanent. The city's response has oscillated between inadequate aid and criminalization, sweeps of encampments without providing alternative housing, ordinances prohibiting sleeping in vehicles. The cruelty is the point, a message that Miami has no space for poverty, even working poverty, especially visible poverty that might disturb the luxury experience. Yet, even now, resistance persists. Tenant unions organize. Community groups fight displacement. Artists create guerrilla installations highlighting inequality. Young activists push for affordable housing mandates and rent control. These efforts face overwhelming odds. The money flows against them. The political structure resists them. The media often ignores them. But they continue because the alternative is accepting Miami's transformation into an exclusive enclave, an American Monaco, where wealth is the only entry ticket. Some neighborhoods resist through sheer cultural stubbornness. Little Havana still has pockets where Cuban culture thrives authentically. Little Haiti's resilience runs deep despite constant gentrification pressure. Alapata maintains its working-class character. These neighborhoods are battlegrounds. Every lease renewal is a small war. Every code enforcement action a potential displacement tool. Every new development a threat. The residents know they're fighting a defensive battle against forces with infinite resources, but they fight anyway, because this is home, and surrendering means losing not just a place, but an identity. The question hangs over Miami like humidity. Can a city remain itself when the people who created its culture cannot afford to live there? Is Miami still Miami if its residents are primarily wealthy transplants and service workers commuting from increasingly distant suburbs? What happens to a city's soul when it becomes a commodity, when every square foot is optimized for maximum return, when the messy, complicated, beautiful diversity of human community is sanitized into an experience designed for those who can afford premium access? Empty tables line Ocean Drive now, outside restaurants desperate for customers but unable to lower prices without sacrificing their positioned exclusivity. Empty streets stretch through downtown after dark as the condos remain unoccupied. Empty promises echo from politicians who celebrate each new development while displacement accelerates. The emptiness at Miami's core is spiritual as much as physical. The weather remains perfect, 300 days of sunshine annually. The ocean still glares turquoise and inviting. The palm trees still sway in the breeze. But the magic, that ineffable quality that made Miami special, has been extracted and commodified. You can still buy a version of it if you can afford the cover charge. But it's not the same magic. It's a synthetic reproduction, impressive perhaps, but lacking the raw, democratic energy that made Miami matter. If you walked those streets in 2005, if you danced in those clubs, if you sat on that beach watching the sunset with people from every background sharing the same free spectacular, you remember what was lost. And if you visit now, wallet thick enough to access the new Miami, you might still have a good time. The drinks are still strong, the music still pounds, the sun still sets beautifully, but you're experiencing a carefully constructed simulation of a city that once existed for real, when the magic was accessible to anyone brave enough to show up. Nobody's partying in Miami anymore, unless you're rich. Then the party never stops, exclusive and eternal, dancing on the grave of what the city used to be.